Hello and welcome to Artifacts, a living archive dedicated to preserving the first-person stories of queer, avant-garde, and underground culture, told by those who lived it. Today's episode is part of our series Underground Press, the untold stories of literary rebellion and the figures who redefined the boundaries of literature and publishing. In this episode, we hear from Barney Rossett, legendary publisher of Grove Press and the visionary behind the Evergreen Review. Rossett changed the landscape of American publishing, with daring censorship battles bringing works like Lady Chatterley's Lover, Tropic of Cancer, and Naked Lunch to U.S. readers. Through Grove, he introduced radical international voices, beat writers, erotica, and politically explosive texts. With Evergreen Review, he invited readers to join the underground. He was, perhaps, the most daring publisher of his era.
And I asked my parents to give me a gift of a group of modern library books and a group of New Directions books. I was going to Swarthmore, so they mailed me, 25 of each, let's say. And one of the New Directions books was The Cosmological Eye, which was a collection of writings of Henry Miller. I don't think I knew anything about Miller. It was just that New Directions was publishing him. And I liked the looks of their books, along with subject matter. It was a part of French painting, poetry, and so on. So I read The Cosmological Eye, and in The Cosmological Eye, a couple of essays about Tropic of Cancer. And that got me interested. Now, but I had no idea where you would get it. Nothing. And that's where I went to one of my fellow students, whose name was William Lieberman, and later became a very well-known art curator in New York. I think now that what I asked him was, where could I get such a book? That book. And he, very coolly, he said, well, you go to the Gotham Book Mart on 47th Street, and there's a woman there whose name is Frances Stellorf, and she will have it. And I did exactly that. I met her from the description I had of her, and I asked her if she had it, and she said yes. And she said, why do you want it? And I said, I'm a student, and I want to use it in school. She said, fine, and sold it to me. And I think it was around $15. And it said, printed in Mexico. So I've now been told it was probably a pirated edition that she was doing. She and a couple of friends in New York. But so there it was. I took it back to Swarthmore. I read it. I was fascinated by it. I was especially fascinated by Miller's description of his girlfriend, whose name in the book is Mona, and she sort of left him, and he's very upset about that. But he finally pulls himself together and says, I will live. I will exist without her. And so the Miller book was a life-saving book to me. The thought of censorship, of sexual censorship, I really don't think was in my consciousness at all, or maybe if it was, very little. I hadn't even heard of Lady Chatterley's Lover, so that didn't get into it. Or if I'd heard of it, I certainly hadn't read it. And I didn't particularly like Lawrence. So it was there, and what I did get from it, though, was an enormous dislike, that Miller felt for the United States, the contempt, which I totally shared with him. Well, some of the things that Miller said, that the people were undifferentiated. It's an odd way of looking at what was thought of as the melting pot of the universe, but Miller said that everybody tried to look alike and eat alike and be middle class. And I thought, he's really disgusting, but something there I have to admire and like. And during that time, Joan had entered into my life, And she got very involved in it. And she moved to France, though. She had a fellowship from the Art Institute. She went to live in Paris, so I had to go back and forth. I finally ended up, when the film was done, of going to France and staying there for a while. Got married there. And then, to continue in a circle, Joan said that what she had to have before coming back here was a thorough feeling for Spanish painting. To do that, you had to go to Madrid to see the Prado and other collections in Spain. And one place I didn't want to go was Spain, the memories of the Spanish Civil War. But we made an agreement that if I went with her to Madrid, she would go with me to Guernica. We would literally drive to Guernica from southern France. And this was during the Franco regime. When Joan brought these books over, it showed a genuine friendship on her part to me. So that made me feel good. That was more important than the books. And I had the books. I made an agreement with John Balcom to stay with me. And I found out soon that he and I just were so different. I liked him, and he was somebody who collected what to me was like famous Collier brothers, who were found dead in their apartment in the East Side, buried by all of their papers. And he was like that, a great follower of Ezra Pound. And I thought Ezra Pound was a great poet and a very bad politician. So I was finally left with the 3 books. One was just a straight reprint of The Confidence Man of Melville. I think it's quite a wonderful book. And that was just a straight reprint. I mean, they bought a copy of the original printing, which I still have, and it was photo offset, and that was the book. Then they did an English woman's writing, Aphra Behn, and that was more creative in that they had to create the book. They did an anthology, in effect, of this writer who was totally forgotten, really, certainly in this country, if she ever was known. She was an early woman writer. And they published that, and then they put together religious poetry of Richard Crashaw. And that was it. For a long time, the only thing I did was I hated the covers they had, which had drawings on it. So I ripped off the covers. I met, I think, another tenant in the building, a would-be designer. And I liked the covers of New Directions, which were one color with typography. Only I didn't like the fact they put the typography at an angle. So I found it was an affectation. It made it hard to read. But other than that, very elegant and simple. So what I did was just have the same yellow paper with typography, which was straight across. And then one day, another young man came in off the street. His name was Roy Coleman. And he showed me ideas for covers, which I didn't particularly like. But when he was leaving, a piece of paper fell out of his pocket, and I grabbed it, and it was like an abstract expressionist painting. That I liked. And so he became our cover designer for the next 20 years. Did everything. And that Henry Miller was the worst one of the problems, because he was taken by New Directions. And I would not do a thing with him until I convinced New Directions to let me go ahead. There was no law, no anything. I felt it was a real moral problem. It took a number of years. And then I'd forgotten one thing. I hadn't gotten Miller. So then I had to start over again. So it took years. But I never stopped for 1 minute on trying to get Miller. And see, and that wasn't all that sudden either. I have a great deal of correspondence with Joan Mitchell. She and I corresponded about Miller years before Grove. Did we like him? Did we not like him? What did we think about his attitudes politically? And we were very skeptical about Miller. We liked Sean O'Casey, was mutually our favorite writer. But we also thought that this Norman Mailer was very interesting. Read Naked and the Dead, and we write back and forth about it. And said, well, you know, that's a real talent there. maybe he will be a writer who, in America can really have something. So these things all continued through. So the publishing, it just became like I'm born there. At the beginning, it was after the two others left.
Yes.
It was just me. I was totally unprepared. And, well, on the surface, that would be. But I was thoroughly prepared to make film, including the business end of it, including keeping records, including, in fact, book publishing was simple after film. I mean, simple of keeping track of what you were doing.
Interested in the nuts and bolts, kind of stuff that you had to figure out.
Well, for example, putting covers on the books. I had a pretty good friend in Joan who had a very keen sense of visual imagery. Then I'd been in the Army, and my very best friend in the Army turned out to be a printer in New York, a few blocks from me, who printed music. And he became the printer of all the Grove Press book jackets. Then the next thing, and it's very much a part of me, is I thought I don't know anything about this, and I must learn something. So I went up to Columbia University, and they had a course on publishing, which I enrolled in. And I think it was the most intelligent thing I did of all. It was very, very good. And I got two things from that course. One was Don Allen. He must have arrived at the same idea as me. He wanted to be involved in publishing. How do you find out about it? We were both oriented towards going to school. And there we both were. And I observed him as a student, and I thought he was extraordinarily intelligent. But secondly, each week, the class was conducted by a different person, and each of the people who conducted the class was really at the top of the profession. I didn't know that then, but they were. And from that class, my advertising director of a company called Sussman and Sugar, and Aaron Sussman had founded the company. I said, I want you. You have got to be my advertising director. And he said, okay. And one of the first things he did was go to Bennett Cerf, who was writing a weekly article for Saturday Review, which was a big magazine there. And Bennett did a wonderful article on me and Grove Press and my wife-to-be, Loli, who had come from Germany. And I hired her, and she was like my first employee. And I married her, and she became the sales manager. But she did everything. She's in this article we have that ran in Newsweek, March 30th, 1953, and it's called The Advance Guard Advance. And they picked on George Plimpton, who was started Paris Review, and whom I didn't know, and a shot taken inside of our glassed-in porch on this brownstone. And in the photograph is myself, and then Lowley, Don Allen, and then by then somebody else, his name was John Gruen. And John knew nothing about book advertising or sales promotion or anything, made our promotion sales person. He was basically a composer, and we were certainly not doing any great amount of business, but we weren't spending very much money either. So that
How much did it cost about to do a book at that time?
well, pretty much what it would cost now. I mean, it didn't. If you didn't give a big advance to an author, if you didn't spend a lot of money on a cover, if you didn't spend a lot of money on advertising, let us say that it cost you $1 a book to print it, bind it. So if you did 3,000 books, okay, that would be your investment plus the author's advance. It never was very unclear to me. I've been trying to be a writer myself and taking writing courses at New School. They didn't have any courses in publishing. And the people I had as teachers were damn good. And William Styron was one of the people studying there, for example, writing. I think he was writing Lie Down in Darkness, right there. And this feeling from Francis Parker and so on was, didn't really bother me. What bothered me was I couldn't write, could not bring myself to writing, but I felt that I could read other people's writing, and I felt when I trusted in a friend of mine or an editor, if Dick Seaver or Don Allen or Fred Jordan really, really, really liked something, that would pretty well convince me. And I hoped that it would be the other way around, that if I saw something that I really liked, they would find a way to telling me I was crazy or that they agreed. So that was it. It was a different kind of problem that I don't think people outside of publishing understood, which was, well, why didn't you publish Hemingway or William Faulkner? And I would have, only they were taken. Steinbeck was under obligations to other people. So there was a certain limit to where you could go. You also had to get what was available. And early on, it became very clear to me that the American publishers were neglecting European writers. And I was particularly attracted to French writers. And there were playwrights. There was a second thing. There was a new theater movement really in this country that was partially European, but is also totally inexplicable to American publishers. Bennett Cerf, who I liked very much, said to me, I always go to the opening night on Broadway, and my partner, and if we like the play and everything, we buy it. But you're undercutting me. You're reading them before they're put on. So then when I find out, it's too late. So, and it was true. And one of the people that was just starting then was Ionesco. And Don Allen, very early on, very attracted to Ionesco. Gil Sorrentino made a statement about Grove that I love, although it is totally not a Grove Press I knew. The Grove Press was crazy land, that you did things that couldn't be done. You just did them because I felt like doing it. And that could lead in any direction, and somehow you'd get there. And it made it so pleasant and so wonderful and so worry-free. And when Dick Seaver read that statement, he was angry. He said, that's not us. That wasn't us at all. And I thought it was, I agreed with Dick, but I loved it. Was the difference. I would have liked to have been like that. That I thought, boy, if it was like that, that was wonderful. And I hope it was. But if you listen to Dick, you wouldn't think so. But Dick was quite extraordinary as a person too, and as an editor, and had an insight. And he liked Beckett as much as I did. I heard of, and Waiting for Godot went on in Paris, and I read about it in the New York Times, I think, a small little piece saying this unfathomable play had opened. And I remembered that. I got a copy of the French edition from the agent here in New York, who had an assistant at that time, wasn't the chief agent, but he was important. It was George Bouchard. And I read it. I thought it was extraordinary. And I went to Wallace Fowley, whom I admired very much at the New School, and I asked him to read the book. I remember when he was finished, he took me out to lunch at his club, the Lotus Club uptown, where I guess it was very fashionable for writers and publishers to go. I'd never been there. We went there, and I sort of said, well, what do you think of this thing, this play? And he said, I assure you, it's going to be one of the most important pieces of work for the theater of the 20th century. And this was coming from a person who was very, very calm, very understated, never made a statement about like that to anything else that I'd ever heard. So that gave me a lot of belief that we weren't making a mistake. And Beckett was thought of as a French writer. He felt very alienated at that point from the English-speaking world, although in my mind later it was less that than he felt that French was a very controlled language. This is my idea, at least. It's very hard to go berserk writing French and getting overly emotional. And his French is very clipped, very short, as opposed to his more Irish attitudes. And I think it helped him. And so I knew that Beckett, after that tentative beginning, that he was really great. And to be associated with him was, it wasn't going to get any better. And it never did. Got more sensational. But the writing never got better. And in his first letter to me, his very first letter, Beckett warns me that he's going to cause me some problems in censorship. And that idea had not occurred to me. And it never occurred to me. I mean, he said it, okay, and I wrote back to him, my second letter to him, saying, let's not worry about it. Sometimes problems like that solve themselves. By the time I got around to Tropic of Cancer, I felt, oh no, here we've got to be ready for trouble. We got ready, the trouble came. It didn't come the way we anticipated, but at least we were ready. And it's only now really, really hit me that the first author I put under contract at Grove Press was Samuel Beckett. And he, to me, was certainly the most important author we ever published. So I think it's taken me many years to actually admit to myself, because it makes me very happy.
What was Beckett like personally in his interaction with you?
Beckett had an ability to concentrate on the person he was with more than anybody else I ever knew in my life outside of a couple of psychoanalysts. He had a zeroing in on you that made you feel very important. You know, anything you said, you felt, he immediately empathized with, which maybe sometimes would make you think he's not, why doesn't he talk more? But he was listening. That turned some people away because they didn't get that feeling. But I thought of him as being standoffish, but the warmest person I ever knew. And I think he must have been psychoanalyzed. I never asked him. He was what I thought an idealized Freud would have been. Sometimes when I couldn't be sympathetic to those other people, he would stand by people I thought, you know, were not good, and like as certain actors. Not that I knew anything about acting, but I didn't think he knew too much either. He was a writer who wanted an actor to do what he wanted. An actor was an object too. But one actor who got out of prison as a lifer at San Quentin and turned out to be, again, finally, a wonderful person. But he was not a good actor. And he put on Kraft's Last Tape in New York. And I taped it and took it to Sam. But he started reading the lines himself so beautifully. It hurt me. So I said to Sam, well, why don't you teach Rick to do it that way? And he said, oh, no, he's not an actor. Now, what are you going to do with that? You said, okay, we'll take it the way it is. We'll never complain again. Because he probably did the same with me to other people. You know, so why don't you get a publisher who knows what he's doing? And I can hear Sam say, oh, but he's not a publisher. And, you know, something that'll just stop you.
Artifacts is a free oral histories platform. Please like, subscribe, and visit our website, www.artifacts.movie, for an ad-free, interactive experience with bonus content. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation at www.artifacts.movie/donate. Hit the link on screen to watch another Artifacts interview.